Today we're going to talk about crystallizations in the body, how they get there, what problems they can cause, and what we can do to get rid of them. Not every crystal in the body causes a problem. Our bones are crystals of calcium acetate and calcium phosphate. Inside the inner ear, there's calcite crystals that help us keep our balance. But there are a lot of crystals in the body that do cause problems. There are some 17 known substances that will crystallize in the human body that we are commonly exposed to or can create. 9 of these dissolve in an alkaline medium. That means if we have a good diet, we probably won't be troubled by them. But 8 of them are unaffected by pH. Today we're going to talk about the oxalates. Oxalates are very simple molecules. Basically, they're 2 carbon dioxide molecules stuck together at their carbon atoms. There are 3 ways we are typically exposed to oxalates. The first is we make some endogenously. Oxalates are produced in the Krebs cycle to a small degree, and by the breakdown of vitamin C. Secondly, oxalates are produced by plants. They produce oxalates to store minerals for future use, to stiffen the tissue structurally. They produce oxalates as a biological defense. Unlike animals that can run or hide or defend themselves, a plant is stuck where it is. So plants develop biochemical defenses, and oxalates are one of those defenses. Animals that eat plants with a high level of oxalates get sick, typically. Plants will also create oxalates in response to certain metal toxins. So the barium and aluminum that are coming down from the geoengineering and the chemtrails are responsible for some of the increased rates of oxalates we're now seeing in plants. And the third way in which we are exposed to oxalates is that they are sprayed directly on plants along with the pesticide glyphosate. Let's take a look at some crystals as seen under a microscope in human urine. Crystals come in many shapes and sizes. Some of them can be extremely sharp and cause a lot of damage. The most well-known crystallizations in the human body would be, of course, kidney stones. Many of us will pass tiny stones without knowing it, or only having a little bit of tenderness, but a good percentage of us will actually pass large and painful stones. Here is an image of 420 kidney stones passed by a Chinese fellow. It was attributed to excess tofu consumption. We'll get into that later. Indeed, soybeans can cause quite a bit of stones. This fellow in India had 856 stones removed. And whoever was so unlucky as to have this kidney actually had to have the kidney completely removed. It was destroyed by stones. But the kidney isn't the only place that stones show up. They also show up in the bladder, as you can see in this image. And this person ended up having a softball-sized stone removed from their bladder. The prostate can also develop stones, as can the breast and the lungs and the joints. You'll also see stones forming in necrotic tissue. In this case, it's not clear whether the stones caused the necrosis or were a result of it. Crystals can also form in the bone marrow, skin, blood vessels, muscles, brain. It seems no part of the body is immune. Crystals have been associated with autism, fibromyalgia, leaky gut, candida, and neurological disorders. And every day, the list seems to grow. So, what can we do about these things? Historically, there were 4 treatments for stones. There was lime, potash, soda, and mineral springs. Lime is calcium carbonate and was created historically by burning seashells or eggshells. Potash, which gives us the word potassium, is literally the ash from the pot. It's burnt vegetable matter, and that's potassium carbonate. And soda is from burnt seaweed, which gives us the sodium carbonate. Those were the 3 great alkalinizers. And there were a lot of secret formulas that were basically one or another of these that were made for people suffering from the stone, as it was called. But remember, only 8 of the 17 known kinds of crystals are susceptible to being dissolved by alkali agents, which takes us to the 4th historical protocol, which were hot springs. Specifically, hot springs that had magnesium sulfate in them. Why magnesium sulfate? It's calcium oxalate that is the biggest offender. Magnesium oxalate is 567 times more soluble, which means it's much more likely to be a liquid that one can urinate out than a stone that precipitates. So by taking magnesium into the body, the calcium oxalate can convert to magnesium oxalate and be urinated out. A caveat here: if you're going to take magnesium for oxalates, it should be transdermal, like in a hot spring. If you take it orally, then any calcium oxalate that you are eating will be converted to magnesium oxalate and be more absorbable, and then can cause problems internally. The sulfate part of the magnesium sulfate would displace the oxalate from the transporters in the membranes. These are good protocols, but can we do better today? Let's talk about that. The first thing we can do is change our diet. If you're concerned about oxalates, there's a Yahoo group that you can join, Trying Low Oxalates, that has the most up-to-date lists. But the biggest offenders are soy, buckwheat, almonds, spinach, rhubarb, and chocolate, unfortunately. But there are others. If we minimize these in our diet, we'll lower our oxalate levels quite a bit. Also, chia seeds, which are enjoying some popularity now, are high in oxalates. If you're going to eat certain vegetables that are high in oxalates, one thing you can do is you can boil them and then toss the water. Oxalates are soluble, so about 1/3 of the oxalates will be removed if you boil them and toss the water. The other thing that you can do is you can mix some calcium in with high oxalate vegetables. The Indian dish where spinach is cooked with dairy is taking advantage of the fact that the calcium in the dairy will bind to the oxalic acid in the spinach, turning it to calcium oxalate and making it less absorbable. The idea that spinach is a healthy food was something that was created in the early 1900s. There was a lot of malnutrition then, and someone said, well, spinach isn't being eaten very much and it's a very nutritious food. Let's get the kids to eat spinach. And so the Popeye the Sailor cartoon was created. And these people meant well. What they didn't realize is, for as nutritious as spinach is, it's also completely loaded with oxalates. What else can we do besides changing our diet? Well, there's things like magnesium sulfate that we can take, Epsom salt baths occasionally. The next thing you should consider is staying hydrated. the more dehydrated you are, the more likely you are to crystallize. Crystals come out of solution at certain saturation points, and if there's enough water in the system, they're much more likely to stay soluble. Also, you can supplement with things like citric acid or potassium citrate. The citrate directly displaces, or citric acid displaces the oxalate and renders it more soluble. Finally, you've got things like electrons, which is, I think, one of the most interesting ways to deal with crystallization challenges. There is a principle called the piezoelectric effect, and it states that if you stress or pressurize a crystal, you squeeze it, electricity will come out. But that principle works in reverse also. If you put electricity into a crystal, it stresses the crystal. The first time that I pulse electricity, high voltage electrons into my body, the next morning, I had an enormous dump of crystals in my urine. I believe that's for two reasons. One, there's the general effect of electrons splitting oxalates at the carbon-carbon bond, turning them into just carbon dioxide. But also, when you put voltage spikes of electrons into the body, you're accessing or utilizing the reverse piezoelectric effect, and you may be able to disintegrate certain crystal phenomena in the body. Now, if you're going to change your diet and stop taking oxalates, then you need to be aware of a phenomenon called the oxalate dump. The body has a natural capacity to remove certain types of crystals, including oxalates. And when you stop taking oxalates in, the body may start dumping oxalates out. And this can create a temporary worsening of whatever problem they're causing. Here's an image of the urine of someone going through an oxalate dump. You can see the residue at the bottom. If you're going through an oxalate dump, remember, citric acid or citrates, Epsom salts, which is magnesium sulfate, in a bath, about a cup to a bath of hot water. Drink lots of water. And again, you might consider the device that we make that puts electrons into the body. Crystal-based diseases are on the rise. From 1994 to 2012, kidney stone incidence doubled. And in men, doubled again to 2016. And at this rate, 1 out of 2 men will have kidney stones in their life by 2025. Why are we seeing so many more crystal-based diseases? Well, part of it is we're not getting enough electrons. The other part is because we are doing what we think is healthy and it's not. Raw spinach in our salad is not good for us because of the high oxalate content. It's better to boil the spinach, toss the water. The green smoothie phenomena, kale chips, we mean well by eating all these plant-based foods, but what's now happening is we're realizing that some of these plant defenses, the oxalates, are causing problems. We also take a lot of supplements now, a lot of plant supplements, a lot of concentrated plant extracts, and some of these are actually extremely high in oxalates. Beet juice powder, which has some really wonderful effects, incredibly high in oxalates. So while we mean well and we're trying to eat healthy, some of the things we've done have had unintended consequences in terms of crystallization. So with a little knowledge, the occasional hot bath with Epsom salts, some lime water, slight change of diet, and from my perspective, daily use of high voltage electrons, I think we can safely say that crystal issues can be dealt with relatively easily. Take care.